What's up everyone, J-Leit here. Welcome to our instructional video on videography in the Mohs suite. This should give you the basics and start you on a learning journey for video recording in the open surgical setting. What's up, J-Leit here, showing you how to set up your C-stand. So your C-stand is going to come assembled to this extent, and this folds up nicely as it is, but you'll want to release these stands. So there's a little release mechanism here. These will splay out into a tripod, and then once they're set, you'll hear that click, that release will set back down. Now you have a couple of telescoping poles that will extend the height of your C-stand, and this is going to be your foundation or your base for stable footage. Okay, so now we've got our C-stand set up. This is going to be our nice stable platform for filming, but what we need to do is get our camera rig over the patient, directly over the surgical field. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. So there are these devices called grip heads, which some of them will mount directly on top of the C-stand on this part here. But I'm going to show you a really great option that mounts directly to the C-stand pole called a super clamp. And this is going to be much more stable when we mount it a little bit lower down on our C-stand. So it's not going to be as unstable being right on top. So we tighten that down, and then there's a quick release here. So we make sure that this is loose. Get our grip handle into the quick release, and then we tighten this down so that's nice and snug. So now we've got a T-handle here and our grip head here, and we can loosen this up to put our boom arm extension. What's up guys? J-Leit here in the Mohs surgery suite. We've got our super clamp attached to our C-stand, and now we're going to use this grip head to extend over the surgical field. There's lots of different options for booms and extensions, but what we have here is a grip head with an extension arm already attached. So this is going to go into our grip head that's on the super clamp, and what we want to do is pick the largest diameter space and then begin to tighten that T-handle down. Now what we want to do is make sure that our T-handles are aligned on the same side. This is going to make it really easy to make some fine adjustments as we're setting our rig up. If the T-handle is on the opposite side, then we have to kind of reach around, and it gets a little bit awkward if we're making adjustments. Now we have a stable platform that's directly over our surgical field, and that's optimal for videography in the Mohs suite. Okay, so the next part of our setup is to describe how we attach our smartphone camera frame to our C-stand with extension arm and grip head. Here we have our metal smartphone camera mount, and although it will not accept a full-size tablet device, it is easily adjustable and ideal for receiving most smartphone devices. We shoot our videos using an iPhone with an adapter case, which will allow us to attach an aftermarket telephoto lens directly to the smartphone. By using this, we are able to achieve a 2x zoom as an initial starting point without engaging the device's native zoom and avoiding digital zoom altogether. This lens is highly recommended to improve your video resolution. Once the lens is attached, we can insert our phone onto the camera frame. This will allow us to attach the phone to our C-stand via the boom extension with the grip head and a flexible gooseneck. When mounting the phone on the frame, be sure to orient the screen so that it is accessible in order to have the ability to control the camera. Simply insert the phone, slide the clamp into place, and tighten the retention screw. We do prefer a metal frame which will support the weight of the equipment without flexing. Now that our device is mounted to the camera frame, we can attach the frame to our flexible gooseneck. This is achieved using a 1/4-20 to 3/8 adapter which attaches to the center of the bottom of the frame. Here's the frame with the gooseneck already attached. This mount will then attach to the grip head for filming your procedure. The next component to attach to the frame is the fill light. There's already one attached on this frame, but we will add another to the far side. By using either end to mount the fill lights, we are able to provide opposing sources of light in order to eliminate shadows that are typically thrown from a surgical lamp. These fill lights are inexpensive, easy to operate, and function off of rechargeable batteries. The nice part about the fill lights is we can control the brightness and color temperature on the lights. Now we have opposing fill lights and our gooseneck on the camera frame. We'll move the device over so you can see a complete rig with the smartphone attached. So we're ready to bring our camera onto the C-stand, and our camera is secure in this camera mount. Our fill light is also attached to the camera mount, and we've got our flexible gooseneck ready to mount onto the grip head. So we kind of slide this in here and make sure that our pin is aligned as we tighten this down. And this flexible gooseneck is really just something that's going to give us a little bit more adjustability for fine-tuning our shot when we're ready to start recording. So as you can see, this rod will flex a little bit, and we can make some adjustments in our extension arm and also some fine adjustments here at the camera to get that angle that we want. What's up, everybody? J-Leit here, talking about our next steps after we've got our C-stand and our camera mounted in our camera frame. We've got our fill light here. Now we're putting it in position above our surgical field. Ideally, you want it to be about perpendicular to your surgical field, but you don't want it to be right on the patient, and you also don't want it to be too high away from the patient. This fill lamp here is going to set directly offset to your surgical lamp so that it's providing a little fill of that traditional shadow space on the patient. Okay, now that we've got our camera rig in position and the surgeon knows exactly where they want to stand during the procedure, we've got our space for our assistant across the table, our Mayo stand is at the head. Next, we want to set the table height. Table height is going to be really ideal for your comfort during the procedure, and also if it's too low, you're not going to have that tendency to hunch over the patient, and when you hunch, you can get into the video frame a little bit more easily. So getting that table up to a comfortable level and as close to the camera as possible is really ideal. Now, once you set your table height, you can then set the focal length on the camera, and that will stay fixed throughout your entire recording. And that's really key because the autofocus won't be on, so anything that comes in and out of the video field is not going to change your focus, and everything will be really crisp at the surgical site. So that's really key. Setting your table height, getting your focal length set on the camera is going to give you great video. Now, if you do need to change your table height during the procedure for whatever reason, just remember that you need to change that focal length on the camera settings. Thank you guys for going through the camera rig setup and positioning in our surgical field. This is really going to optimize your videography in the Mohs surgery suite. Our next video is going to go into detail about how to set up your third-party video recording app on your smartphone to lock in settings for your focal length, your white balance and color temperature, as well as your exposure settings. So, see you there.
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Chris Garvey, photographer and videographer for the OHSU Mohs Clinic, here to talk to you today about operating the Movie Pro app. We'll start by going into the settings menu, which will provide a series of choices that will allow you to lock in your settings for your video recording. We'll start with the preset which is simply a name for the collection of settings that you're going to use for your video recording. If you have multiple procedure rooms or multiple scenarios with lighting or other situations that you need to have a collection of settings for, you can name multiple presets and then just choose or bring up that collection of settings so that you don't have to reset the camera every single time. We'll start with mode. We want that to be in video mode. Resolution. You should use the highest resolution that your device allows. In this particular case, 3840 by 2160, which is 4K, with a 16:9 aspect ratio. Next is frame rate. Frame rate should either be on 30 or 24. Those are the two accepted frame rates for smartphone video recording in the US. Video encoding deals with data compression. If you have an enormous amount of memory, a higher number, something like the 250% that we run on, would be a great number to run at. If you don't have an ample amount of memory external to the device itself, then something lower, like about 150%, would probably be a good number to run with. Video HDR can be left off. Audio, we run with silent. It's much easier to add a voiceover or a narration later when you're not trying to focus on the procedure. So we actually run with no sound whatsoever. Video stabilization should be in the cinematic mode. We found that that's the greatest success for your videos. Battery saver mode, if you don't have an AC power source for your device during recording, then you can go ahead and leave that on. Saving option, if you use the save to camera roll option, and it saves directly to your camera roll on your device, then that will actually have a little bit of degradation to the video itself. If you simply allow the device to save it into the library that is within the app and then move it to the camera roll, you won't suffer nearly as much degradation. So we go ahead and leave that setting off. Remote, there is a remote control app for this particular app also, but that app tends to have a lot of problems. It's still glitchy, still in development, so we'll leave that off for now, and we can revisit it if they make some progress. Mirror front cam you can leave on. Tap to hide interface, we like that to be off. We want to see all the settings all the time while we're recording so we know what's happening. Orientation, we want that to be horizontal or landscape, sometimes referred to as cinematic. That way we don't lose the bands of available space on either side of the video recording that you would get in portrait mode. Camera preview, you can go ahead and leave that on because you want to be able to see what's happening and what's being recorded while you're recording. The built-in mic, the Bluetooth mic, and the volume shutter are all kind of something that you can leave alone. Those don't need to be on. We're not using any sound, so these two are not really much of an issue. The record duration, you want that to be on unlimited. You don't want to limit the size of the recording for each procedure. You may lose the end of the procedure or some portion of it if you limit the actual size. Zoom default user interface. We use the plus and minus buttons. We think those are a little more exacting. And you can also use focus peaking with the zoom, and that works well with the plus and minus buttons. What the focus peaking does is provide for you on the screen green areas every time you change your zoom. Those green areas are actually the areas that are in focus, and that's awful helpful when you're trying to change during the procedure. Location tagging, you can use that if you'd like. We tend to use it off. Copyright, for the purposes of this video, I just added my name and a date. Hardware accessories, we don't really use the gimbal or a Moondog Labs. If you wanted to use a Dropbox account as your upload option, you certainly could. We don't do that currently. Disk space will just let you know how much disk space this app is currently occupying. And that's an awful nice number to have if you have a limited amount of space. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Chris Garvey, photographer and videographer for the OHSU Mohs Clinic, here to talk to you about operating the Movie Pro app. We're going to talk about some of the on-screen options, and we'll start right up here in the corner and work our way counterclockwise. Right up here in the corner we have a battery gauge, which will allow you to know how much battery is left on the device with simply a glance. If you don't have an AC power source for your device during the procedure, that is a very useful tool. Right below that is a pie chart. Pie chart indicates how much disk space is being used on the device and how much is left. Also a useful tool if it's a long procedure. We'll move right down to tint and temperature. Tint and temperature, basically subsets of white balance. The tint settings will help you keep your patient's skin tone from being too green or too pink. We tend to run it right about 10 on the green side. That seems to bring out a nice natural skin tone for most patients. Temperature will help you adjust the warmth of your video and will aid in compensating for your surgical and fluorescent lighting. This is based on the Kelvin color temperature scale. A starting value of around 3100 is comparable to a standard tungsten light bulb and will offset the clinical fluorescent lighting, which runs about 4500 Kelvin, and surgical lighting, which can run 6500 Kelvin or higher. We'll go ahead and close that temperature and tint menu, and we'll open the manual settings menu. We'll start right up here with exposure. Exposure can be a tricky one. It's very easy to overexpose videos, especially in the surgical setting. So we start with that at 0. I would also suggest that you start yours at 0. And if you feel like you need more exposure, then go ahead and try it. But it's very easy to overexpose, which will make your video editing later extremely difficult. Next, we'll move on to ISO. Basically, this is the amount of light that we will allow into your camera, or the sensitivity to light that your camera operates at. We tend to move it as low as it will go on the device that you're using. In this particular case, that setting is 30. The next setting will be our shutter speed. Shutter speed can be set to a very fast, in fact oddly fast setting. Normally in photographic terms, your shutter speed would be twice your frame rate, but in the surgical setting, I've not found this to be real practical. We use some odd settings, but surgical lights are odd light sources with harsh edges. You'll have to do some experimenting to ascertain the optimal settings for your surgical or fill lights, but in our setting I have found values between 1/1200 and 1/1250 to be effective, and you can see the change on the screen as I make these setting changes. Closing the manual settings menu, we'll move right over here to the library. This is where you will actually be able to access the videos that you have taken within the app's actual memory. You can move these very easily by simply coming over here and touching on the down arrow and then moving to the variety of places that are available, including the camera roll on your device. This is the settings button that we used earlier to access the settings menu, which gave us the values that we locked in for our recordings. We'll move all the way over here. This is our video recording start and stop. So if you want to start the recording, you simply touch that. And then if you wanted to pause the procedure, whether it be to rearrange the patient, raise the table, or whatever the case may be, you can simply press the pause button. And then to resume recording, you go ahead and press that play button, and you will resume your recording. If you're ready to stop the recording and end it, go ahead and press the square. The plus and minus buttons that you see on the side are the user interface zoom buttons that we talked about earlier. You'll see that there's a numeric value that's associated as well. Try not to let that value get over 2, otherwise you'll be moving into the camera's digital zoom, which will degrade the quality of your video. You'll see that as I touch these, there's a slight green on the screen. That green is the focus peaking that we spoke about earlier, and will tell you where on the screen after your zoom the areas of the greatest focus are. In order to focus on the part of the procedure that you want to highlight the most, simply move the reticle to where you want to be in the most focus, then go ahead and lock it. You'll see a notification at the top of the screen that says focus locked. To unlock, simply tap it again. The other reticle is your exposure reticle. That we want to move close to the focus reticle, and then we'll leave it alone. Once your settings for exposure are set before the procedure, you don't want to move the exposure reticle because that will activate your auto exposure and potentially change the settings that we entered in the beginning.
Thank you for joining us today. Please follow us on Instagram, and please let us know if you have any questions or comments. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button